Now, what about the state of the judiciary in South Africa keeps you awake at night?
Well, I don't think the judiciary is in crisis as it is often made out to be in the media. We obviously don't have a Chief Justice, and the Chief Justice must be appointed, and that is a political process over which we have no control. But I think the system, there is a good system of justice in place. We do experience problems from now. We do experience some problems, but I wouldn't say there's a crisis. For me, the backlogs in the courts continue to be a problem, but not to an alarming level. So in short, I believe there is no problem that faces the judiciary which is insurmountable. Whatever problems we have, such as backlogs, especially necessitated by COVID-19 and access to courts, these are problems that we can deal with. Perhaps what is really a problem is still access to justice. There again, you need a number of stakeholders. I've mentioned one thing: we need to make our judgments shorter and speak to the public as far as we can. Perhaps the other thing is to create more and more courts, especially in rural areas. And constitutional education, that's just one other area, because it doesn't have to say our courts are wide open. Anyone who wants to litigate, you can come in anytime between 9 and 5. If our people are not educated about the basic rights that they have. I would also, one of the things that make me unhappy at night, I think our criminal justice system, we tend to concentrate more and more on the rise of the accused person to remain silent, the rise of an accused person to be detained properly and so on, and not to be subjected to inhumane treatment. But we have done that at the expense of the victim of crime. It seems to me we should pay more and more attention to the victim of crime. For instance, what stops a judge from saying the woman who has been raped by a 65-year-old man or a 62-year-old man, that man, part of the sentence must be that whatever money he earns, he must use to pay for the counseling, right, of that particular victim, right? So we can be creative and think out of the box. Those are some of the areas which, in my view, require some reform as we go along. But I don't think we have an alarming crisis which cannot be solved.
Well, I don't know whether it's true or not. I have no opinion. Because I believe intently in the presumption of judicial impartiality and the integrity to which judges swear an oath.
That's right, of office.
So I don't believe these rumors that some judges may be captured. There are people who spread rumors that the CR17 campaign has names of judges who are on the take there, and that's why they rule in his favor, and so on. It's all rumors, certainly on Twitter. So when I ask you the question about what about the judiciary, if anything, gives you sleepless nights, I have that at the back of my mind. Are you aware of these rumors?
Well, Mr. Ngalwana, I can tell you one thing. If my name was on the list, you would have known by now. Because the media would say Hlophe is corrupt. They would only refer to me. Yes, I've heard such rumors, but I prefer not to express any views. I don't believe that to begin with. And I don't think it is for me, sitting right here in the absence of any evidence, to confirm that or to deny it. I have seen such rumors. There was an article about 4 or 5 months again in the press, and with names of certain people. My name was definitely not on the list, right? So I do not wish to comment beyond what I've already said. I have seen that, but definitely I'm not captured. I'm independent in my judgments. I know there was even a suggestion by the Democratic Alliance in the province that my name was on the South African, on this state security agent, that I was perhaps on the pay list of SSA, State Security Agent. I'm sure they did their homework and my name is not on that list. Right. Obviously, if there are judges who are on the pay list, it would be shocking, it would be alarming and not good for democracy, but I can assure you, I am not on anybody's pay list. I live on the salary that is paid to me by the department. And again, as I have said, if I were on the list, the whole world would know by now.
Now, some people, I won't say many, some people have suggested that perhaps the only way to find out whether or not these rumors are true is an investigation.
Yes.
I'm not going to ask you, because I don't think it would be fair to ask a sitting judge about whether he would support such a view. But I thought I should just mention that is something that some people are suggesting, that maybe there should be a judicial inquiry, perhaps chaired by a Botswana judge or some other judges from outside of South Africa to get to the bottom of these rumors. But here's the question I want to ask you, which has got nothing to do with this, is have you acted or have you been invited ever to act in the Supreme Court of Appeal or in the Constitutional Court?
Supreme Court of Appeal, yes. I was invited by the late Chief Justice Ishmael Mohammed way back in 1998. This was just before I was appointed as a Deputy Judge President. Yes, I was invited and I declined at that time for due reasons. I was relatively new on the bench because it was in 1998. And secondly, I did say to him, thank you for showing confidence in me, but I'm a very keen administrator. I would like to concentrate on administration. So I declined that. There was also a suggestion made by Craig Howie when he was president of the SCA to invite me again. I said, I'm concentrating on administration.
When was that?
He was, Justice Craig Howie at that time was still president of the SCA before he's retired.
So that would have been in the early
10,
2000s?
12, 13, 14 years back. Somebody again from the SCA, who was the head of the SCA, was the late Chief Justice Van Heerden. Van Heerden took over just before Howie. He came to the division several times and asked me again. I declined. So I've had 3 requests from the SCA. The late Chief Justice Mohammed invited me, Van Heerden, and Justice Craig Howie, who was still alive. And then I declined. I said, look, I would like to concentrate on administration. That's the SCA, yes. The Constitutional Court, I've never been invited to act in the Constitutional Court. No, I've never been.
Why do you think that is? I mean, a man of your talent.
Well, I suppose after 2008 and the complaint that was leveled against me, I view it in one context. It was a deliberate and desperate attempt to keep me out of the Constitutional Court.
But by that time, you had been a judge since 1995.
1995, yes,
So
I've been a
that's
judge.
18 years.
No,
Before 2008.
1995, 2005, 6, 7,
Am I
8,
arithmetic?
13.
13 years.
Yes, 13.
So at least in that first 13 years, you could still have been invited to act in the Constitutional Court.
Yes, I could still have been invited to act. At that time, the Chief Justice was Charles Carlson. And after my racism report, I don't think he was happy with me. His name was featured in my racism report, which saw the light of the day in 2004. Remember, the turning point was 2004. Before 2004, I had no problems in the judiciary at all. After 2004, Charles Carlson was still then the Chief Justice in this country. Given that his name was featured in the racism report, right, it's highly unlikely that he would have invited me to go to that court.
In what context, just as a matter of interest, well, for the benefit of the viewers, because I'm also not aware, in what context was his name featured in the racism report?
I do not remember specifically, but there were things that when there were various attempts that he, for instance, it's all tabulated in the racism report. I think where I mentioned his name, it was in the context of somebody that he wanted to become an advocate. Sorry.
A judge.
A white advocate who was still at the bar that he wanted to become a judge, and I blocked him, right? And I recommended black judges who are still on this bench. That advocate lost to Roshni Ali. That advocate availed himself again and lost to Dan Dlodlo, and the same advocate availed himself again and lost for the third time to Bash Wenkley. That created some kind of tension between us, and I think in the racism report I did allude to the fact that the reaction that was generated was, in my view, it bordered on racism.
Right. Now, moving on to the next issue, which is, you'll be aware of the controversy, I don't know if I should call it a controversy, without being controversial. Now, you will know there's a debate about vaccination and COVID and so on in
Yes.
South Africa and the world over.
Yes,
I don't want to deal with whether or not people should vaccinate.
That's
It's people's personal choices. But there has been developing concern about making COVID-19 vaccination mandatory.
right, compulsory in other words.
Yes, and there have at least two judges of whom I'm aware,
Yes, I'm aware of that.
who have entered the fray. One is quoted as having said people who are what's the word?
Vaccinated.
Hesitant, who are hesitant
To vaccinate.
to vaccination are tantamount to AIDS denialists or something. And the second one in Johannesburg has issued
Yes, I saw Deputy Justice Sutherland,
yes, a directive to other judges.
Deputy Judge President Sutherland, yes.
Yes, saying he's going to put a note on his door that if you're not vaccinated, you may not enter, and so on. So judges have expressed their views on this
Yes.
issue. Now, what do you think, if anything, because it hasn't been made compulsory yet, this vaccination thing, what, if anything, would be the human rights implications of compulsory vaccination?
All right, before we get there, Mr. Ngalwana, allow me to say the following. Firstly, I think it is wrong for judges, a sitting judge or a retired judge or anyone under the name judge, to express views contrary to the official position that our government has taken. Our president clearly said vaccination is optional until there is a change in terms of the official policy of the government. It is wrong for judges to pronounce on anything. Now, to answer your question directly, we're obviously dealing with various competing rights here. And no right is absolute. I've got the right to good health, you also have a right to good health. If there is, in my view, convincing medical evidence that people who are not vaccinated are going to spread COVID-19, and therefore there is a compelling reason for everybody else to be vaccinated, I would go along with that, because I take it at that point that would be the official position of the government. But I think as individuals it is wrong, because no right is absolute, which trumps other rights. I think, judges, it is wrong to say in my chambers I don't want anybody who has not been vaccinated. There is social distancing to begin with, and we are expected by matter of law to wear masks. And if the judge doesn't want anybody in his or her chambers, you rather say nobody is allowed in my chambers, and not treat people who have not been vaccinated as second-class citizens. Discrimination in any form should not be countenanced, in my view. But until such time that the official government policy in this regard, until such time that it changes, it is wrong for us to speculate. I'm not a doctor, I'm not a medical expert, and that is as far as I can go.
But you're a human rights lawyer.
Yes, I'm a human rights lawyer, and that's why I said no right is absolute. We must look at different rights. Like you have the right to good health, I also have that right. And there are people who may object to vaccination for health reasons or religious reasons, I don't know. But it is very clear to me at the same time, having said that, the rights of individuals cannot trump the rights of others, especially in a situation like that. But I think it's fair to say, let us look up to our government. We have elected this government. If the government says everyone must be vaccinated, irrespective of your views, I would go along with that. But I think it's wrong for us to start talking and preempting what should happen, let alone saying in my court everybody must be vaccinated. No, I think it is wrong.
Thank you, JP. I would like us to deal with the last issue in the next segment, which is open-ended.